In today's video, a marathon runner from Portland convinced herself her training schedule would protect her, even though it had killed people fitter than she was. She hiked Death Valley's Mesquite Flat Sand Dunes during the hottest documented hour of the hottest documented summer in the park's history. She made it less than 3 miles before the ranger who had refused her at the trailhead drove out alone to find her. And what that ranger saw on the salt forced her into a recovery she still describes as the slowest of her career. The date was July 20th, a Saturday, and the air temperature at the Furnace Creek Visitor Center had already touched 118 degrees Fahrenheit by 11:17 a.m. when the woman pulled her rental Subaru into the Mesquite Flat parking area. She was 34 years old, a senior brand strategist at a Portland technology firm, and she had logged 3 full marathons that calendar year, including the Boston Marathon in April, which she had finished in 3 hours, 28 minutes, 12 seconds. Her standing personal best at 26.2 miles was 12 seconds shy of qualifying for the New York City Marathon's elite seating pool. She had been running competitively since high school. She did not consider herself reckless. She considered herself trained. She had told her partner the night before flying south that the heat was the part she trained for. She had run 12 miles in a sauna suit the previous weekend on the trails near Forest Park. Her resting heart rate, measured by her sleep tracker that morning, was 48 beats per minute. Her watch showed 8 consecutive nights of optimal recovery scores. She had brought her hydration vest, her pace card, 2 electrolyte tablets in a screw-top vial, a phone with no service inside the park, and a printed park map that her boyfriend had folded into her vest pocket without her asking. She was, by every metric she had ever used to evaluate her own readiness for a hard run, prepared. The metrics she had ever used did not include the metrics that governed survival in the Mojave below sea level in July. She had never been south of San Francisco in summer. She had never run in air that exceeded 110 degrees. The number on her watch when she stepped out of the Subaru read 121 degrees Fahrenheit, and the climbing column on her watch's barometer showed her standing 212 feet below sea level. Neither number meant anything to her body. Both numbers meant something to the ranger watching her from across the lot. Marathon training builds cardiovascular efficiency for conditions where the human body can still cool itself. It assumes sweat will evaporate, that ambient temperature will stay meaningfully below the temperature of human skin, that the runner will replenish fluids at a rate close to the rate she is losing them. Death Valley in late July satisfies none of those assumptions. Sweat does not evaporate fast enough. Ambient temperature exceeds skin temperature for hours at a stretch in the late afternoon. Cardiovascular efficiency in those conditions does not protect the runner. It accelerates her heat absorption. A trained athlete metabolizes oxygen and produces internal heat at 3 to 4 times resting baseline during sustained effort. In an environment where the only cooling pathway is evaporation, and evaporation is itself collapsing, the fittest body fails fastest. The marathon time on her wrist was not protection. It was a clock running the wrong direction. Ranger Renee Voss had been on trailhead duty since 6 in the morning. She was 47 years old, 19 years with the National Park Service, 11 of them at Death Valley. She had begun her career at Yellowstone, where she spent 4 summers, then transferred to Sequoia, then to Death Valley, where her sister-in-law was treating heat illness at the Pahrump Hospital and asking her over Christmas dinner each year why no one had told the visitors what the desert actually did. Voss had recovered 14 hyperthermia fatalities personally over the course of her tenure and had assisted in 22 others. She had logged 46 trailhead advisories that summer against hikes she considered medically inadvisable. 3 of those advisories had ended in the visitor turning around at the lot. The other 43 had been overruled by the visitor's certainty. She kept count. The number was not a vibe. It was a paper trail filed with the regional office at Pacific West. She watched the Portland runner step out of the rental in compression shorts, a neon coral sports bra, a visor, and an ultralight running vest with 2 500-milliliter soft flasks tucked into the chest pockets, 1 liter of water, The recommended carry for that distance at that hour, posted on the laminated card that hung from the trailhead kiosk, was 4. Voss had already that morning turned back 2 families and a German couple who had wanted to walk to the salt pan in flip-flops. She walked over to the Subaru. She introduced herself by first name. She asked the runner where she was headed. The runner pointed at the dunes and said she was running a 6-mile loop across them to the salt flats and back, a route she had mapped on her phone the night before in the hotel. Voss asked her how much water she was carrying. The runner showed her the flasks. Voss asked her if she had read the conditions board that morning at Furnace Creek. The runner said she had. Voss asked her if she was aware that the surface temperature on the salt pan that afternoon was projected to exceed 165 degrees Fahrenheit. The runner said she had read about it. She said she trained for heat. She said she would be back before 2. It was already 11:47 a.m., the hottest hour in the documented climate record at Death Valley Falls, between 3 and 4 p.m. local time. The runner was walking into the leading edge of that hour on a 6-mile loop. She had budgeted for 90 minutes. Voss read her the standard advisory aloud, slowly, then asked her to sign the trailhead acknowledgement form, which states in plain language that the National Park Service strongly recommends against hiking below 4,500 feet of elevation after 10 a.m. in July and August. The runner signed it. She wrote her name in careful, looping handwriting that filled the entire line. She smiled at Voss. She said thank you. She turned toward the dunes. Voss watched her go. She had seen this exact sequence 11 times that summer. 5 of those 11 had returned to the lot on their own legs. 4 had been picked up by other visitors and driven out. 2 had not come back walking. Voss noted the runner's name, her vehicle plate, her departure time, and her water carry on the trailhead log. She set a phone timer for 90 minutes. Higher up on the dunes, the calculation would change. The first mile of the Mesquite Flat Traverse runs west across loose sand that is comfortable to walk on and almost impossible to run on. The runner attempted to run it. Her pace card called for 11 minutes per mile through this section. She logged it in 14 minutes. By the time she crossed the first dune ridge, her right calf was cramping. She drank from the first flask. She had brought electrolyte tablets but had not pre-dissolved them. The salt sat on her tongue and stayed there. She kept running. By 12:33 p.m., she had crossed the dune field and reached the edge of the salt pan. The temperature on her watch had climbed to 121 degrees Fahrenheit and was still rising. Her wrist was wet, but the air around her wrist was bone dry. The sweat was leaving her body and not cooling her. The surface temperature beneath her shoes had passed 145 degrees and was climbing toward 160. The salt reflected sunlight upward at intensities her sunglasses had not been engineered for. Heat radiated at her from below, above, and at every angle in between. She was, by every objective measure available in that moment, in the wrong place at the wrong hour, with the wrong amount of water and the wrong body for the math the desert was running on her. The second flask was empty by mile 2. She had drunk 1 liter of water in 73 minutes of exertion at 121 degrees ambient. Adequate fluid replacement at that exposure begins at 1 liter every 30 minutes. She was operating at less than 1/3 of the volume her body was losing. Her core temperature, when later measured by the responding paramedic, had risen to 104 degrees Fahrenheit by the time she reached the salt pan. At 104, cognition begins to fail. Reaction time slows. Decision-making degrades in ways the person making the decisions cannot detect from the inside. She turned around at the edge of the salt pan. The decision to turn around was the right one and arrived later than it should have. The decision to attempt the return at the same effort was wrong and arrived because the brain making it was no longer running at full capacity. She had stopped swelting somewhere around mile 2.5. The cessation of sweat is the most reliable diagnostic marker of imminent heat stroke that medicine has documented. Her body had run out of fluid to convert into evaporative cooling. The signal that her body was no longer cooling itself was the signal her own pace card could not interpret. She kept moving. She believed she was negotiating with the heat. The heat was not negotiating. By mile 2.7, she fell for the first time. She caught herself on her hands. She got up. She drank from the second flask, which contained nothing. She put it back. By mile 2.9, she fell again. She did not stand back up. She moved forward on her hands and knees, then on her hands, then on her elbows. Her face was 3 inches above sand that was, in that hour, hotter than the inside of a domestic oven set to warm a roast. The dust kicking up around her was not dust. It was salt crystallized out of evaporated brine. It coated her face and her sports bra and the inside of her mouth. Renee Voss's phone timer hit 90 minutes at 1:17 p.m. The runner did not appear at the trailhead. Voss radioed the visitor center. She pulled the trailhead log. She drove the service vehicle out onto the parallel access road at 1:24 p.m. carrying 8 liters of water, an electrolyte drip kit, a thermal blanket, and the standard recovery board. She was alone. Saturday afternoon, staffing at outlying trailheads has been a documented shortage in Death Valley budget reports for 6 consecutive fiscal years, a finding submitted by the Park Superintendent's Office to Pacific West Regional in writing every year since 2019. She drove the access road slowly, with the driver's window down, scanning the dune ridge for a moving silhouette. The temperature at the dashboard sensor read 123. She had recovered 5 hikers from that same stretch over the course of her career. The first one she had recovered alive. The 5th one she had not. The 4 in between had each shaped how she ran the timer at the trailhead, how aggressively she advised, how soon she stopped waiting and started driving. She did not stop driving at the 90-minute mark anymore. She started driving at minute 86. She found the runner at 1:51 p.m., 200 meters short of the dune ridge that separated the salt pan from the parking lot. The runner was on her hands and knees in the sand. Her sports bra was crusted white with dried salt. Her face was the color of brick. She was conscious, but barely. She did not recognize Voss. She asked Voss if she was at the finish line. Voss said no. Voss said, "You are in Death Valley, and we are going to the car, and you are going to live, but you need to do exactly what I say, and you need to do it slowly." The runner nodded. The runner attempted to stand. She could not. She could not move her further alone. Voss's hand was bruised from a different recovery the week before. Her ribs made every lift agonizing. Continuing means dragging a 138-pound adult human across loose sand at 123 degrees ambient. She did it. She pulled the runner onto the thermal blanket, lifted the corner, and dragged her in stages. 10 feet, rest, 10 feet, rest, the way she had been taught at the Grand Canyon's recovery course in the spring of 2007. She poured 1 liter of water across the runner's neck and chest and the inside of her thighs, where the body's largest superficial arteries run closest to the surface. She did not let her drink. Drinking too fast at that core temperature induces vomiting, which accelerates fluid loss. She wet a cloth and pressed it against the runner's forehead, her armpits, the inside of her wrists. She radioed for the second vehicle. The second vehicle was 47 minutes out. She did not wait for it. The runner's core temperature at the trailhead, taken at 2:17 p.m. by the responding paramedic, was 105.8 degrees Fahrenheit. Her oxygen saturation on room air was 88%. Her heart rate, normally 48 at rest, was registering 162. She was loaded into the air ambulance at 2:43 p.m. and admitted to the trauma intensive care unit at Mountain View Hospital in Las Vegas by 4:20. She spent 14 days in the hospital, 8 of them in the ICU. She lost partial kidney function. Her recovery from rhabdomyolysis, the muscle tissue breakdown that follows severe hyperthermia, took 11 months and required 2 rounds of physical therapy. She has not run a competitive marathon since. She is, in the documentary sense, one of the fortunate ones. Voss got to her before her body stopped on the sand. The Portland runner is the 3rd hiker Voss has personally pulled from that exact stretch of trail. The other 2 she pulled from that stretch did not survive. One was a Marine 26-year-old, an ultra-marathoner with sub-3-hour marathon credentials. The other was a 41-year-old triathlete from Sacramento. Both of them had submitted similar arguments about their preparation. Neither of their cardiovascular advantages had translated. The medical explanation is not difficult, and it is not new. Heat illness is not a function of fitness. It is a function of evaporative cooling capacity, ambient temperature, humidity, and hydration intake. When ambient temperature exceeds 104 degrees, the human body cannot dissipate heat through convection or radiation. Evaporation becomes the only remaining pathway. Evaporation requires sufficient water in the body and air dry enough to accept it. Both conditions degrade rapidly during exertion. A fit hiker exerting at high intensity in 121-degree heat produces metabolic heat at 3 to 4 times resting baseline. The body cannot keep up. The body has never been able to keep up. The data on this has not changed since the park began keeping environmental records in 1932. What changed that summer was the volume of visitors arriving with personal certainty large enough to overrule the data. The park logged 1.3 million visits in July alone. Voss's individual advisory count of 46 was a small fraction of the system-wide advisories issued across all trailheads. The pattern she watched the Portland runner enact, she had watched dozens of other hikers enact in the preceding 2 months. The trailhead acknowledgement form, signed in careful looping handwriting, is the documentary signature of the gap between what the hiker believes about herself and what the desert can absorb. Voss has been quoted in 2 NPS interpretive briefings since that summer. She does not speak about specific cases. She speaks about what she calls the 90-minute window, the period between when she watches a hiker disappear over the first dune ridge and when she begins counting how long it has been. Some of those windows close on their own, some do not. The Portland runner's window closed at minute 94, when Voss decided not to wait any longer. 4 more minutes, and the outcome the paramedics described as borderline would have crossed the border into the column where the names do not come back. The deadliest hour at Mesquite Flat is not the hour when the temperature peaks. It is the hour when a hiker is somewhere on the loop, somewhere between her own pace card and the closest source of water, somewhere between the gap she trained to close and the gap the desert will not let her close. The Portland runner's window closed because Renee Voss was counting. The next runner's window will close or will not, depending on whether the person at the trailhead is counting too. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, click on your screen.